Readings of Almighty God's Words. Exposing Antichrists.
Item 9. They do their duty only to distinguish themselves and feed their own interests and ambitions. They never consider the interests of God's house, and they even sell out those interests, trading them for personal glory. Part 9. B. The ways in which Antichrists regard the title service doer. The topic for today's fellowship is the dissection of Antichrist's attitude toward the title service doer. Now that we've finished fellowshipping on the definition of the title service doer, do most people not have a positive understanding of this title? Do you still feel resistance or unwillingness toward this title?
No.
So, let's now look at how Antichrists regard the title of service doer and what attitude they have toward it. What Antichrists treasure most are high position, high prestige, and absolute power. When it comes to some very common grassroots and lower-level titles, and other titles which people find fairly humiliating, Antichrists feel severe resistance and discrimination in their hearts. And they feel this for the title of service doer in particular. No matter how tolerant and patient God is toward this group of people known as service doers, and no matter what God's explanation and interpretation of the title service doer are, Antichrists still look down upon this title deep inside their hearts. They think that this title is too lowly, and that if they themselves were service doers, they'd be too ashamed to show their faces. They think that the moment they're given this title, their integrity, pride, and reputation are being challenged and belittled. Their value takes a nosedive, and there's no meaning to life anymore. Therefore, Antichrists will not accept this title of service doer no matter what. If you ask them to go to God's house and render service for God's work, they say, "The title of service doer is too degrading, and I'm not willing to be one anyway. By asking me to be a service doer, you're insulting me. I didn't come to believe in God so that you could insult me. I came to receive blessings. Otherwise, what have I forsaken my family, left my job, and given up my worldly prospects for? I didn't come to be a service doer. I didn't come to work for you and serve you. If you tell me to be a service doer, then I'd rather not believe at all." Isn't this the Antichrist's attitude? There are even Antichrists who say, "If you tell me to be a service doer in God's house, then what's the point of me believing in God? What meaning does it still have?" Therefore, when they undertake a job and accept a commission or task in God's house, they first want to figure out the following. After I take on this job, will I be a church leader or a team leader? Or will I be just a minion serving and working for others? Before figuring this out, they get to work for the time being. During this period, they observe people's words and expressions, keep their eyes peeled and their ears open, and ask for information from various sources. They want to know whether they're temporarily rendering service here, or whether they can do this job long term, whether they're someone who can be cultivated, or someone who is just being temporarily used to fill a vacancy. If they're just being used to fill a vacancy, and they're being asked to serve for the merit of others and for the position and power of others, then they absolutely will not do it. They don't care whether God's house needs them to do a duty, or how important the duty they do is for the work of God's house. They don't care about these things. Once they realize that they're rendering service here without the power to call the shots and make decisions, they become perfunctory in their actions. They neglect their duty. They act recklessly. They also become autocratic, and they can even turn their back on their duty and leave at any moment. They regard the work of God's house and their own duty as if they were children's games. They have a life motto that goes like this: I'm not going to toil away behind the scenes while others take the spotlight. They think, I was born to be a leader. I was born with the power to call the shots and make decisions. If I were to lose those two things, then what would be the point of living anymore? What meaning would there be in believing in God anymore? Why am I believing in God? Didn't I give up minor benefits in order to receive major blessings? If this desire can't be fulfilled, then I'd unquestionably rather follow worldly trends and go down to hell. What is the Antichrist's maxim? No way am I letting anyone exploit me on their way to the top. I'm the one who exploits others. If people are rewarded based on their contributions, then I should be at the top of the list. Only then will I work energetically and give it my all. Otherwise, you can forget about getting me to do that. If you ask me to push myself, to give you advice, and to work with all my heart and soul, but in the end, when it comes time for people to be rewarded based on their contributions, I receive nothing, then you can forget about asking me to work for you, exert myself for you, and serve you. Aren't these the true revelations and manifestations of the Antichrist's disposition? Even though they don't intentionally try to shake off the title of service doer. In terms of their disposition essence, they're constantly shaking it off and constantly fighting, working hard, and struggling to rid themselves of this title. If, when an Antichrist undertakes some work, they have a chance to stand out and take center stage, or if they have the final say and make decisions, become a leader, have position, influence, and prestige, and have some people under them, they feel so pleased. If one day someone exposes a problem with them and prunes them, saying, there are a lot of things that you don't handle according to the principles, and instead handle however you wish. This is the behavior of someone who is purely rendering service. You are not doing your duty. Can the Antichrist accept that?
No.
First, they will profess their innocence, explain it away, and plead their case. And second, they'll instantly feel aversion and resistance toward the words rendering service, and absolutely won't accept them. They'll say, I've paid such a high price and suffered so much. I start work early and finish late at night, and I lose sleep and forget to eat, and yet you still say I'm rendering service? Are there really people who render service like this? I've paid such a high price, and all I get for it is this title, this definition of service doer. What is there for me to look forward to then? What meaning is there to believing in God? What motivation is there? It's better not to believe in this kind of God. They lose their enthusiasm. After being pruned, not only do antichrists refuse to accept it, they also feel resistance and become averse. And even more so, they form misunderstandings. When they work and do their duty after that, their attitude is changed, and they think, I'm a service doer now, no matter what I do. So when I do this work, I'd better hold back, leave myself a backup plan, and not give it all I've got. Everyone says God is righteous, so how come I can't see it? How is God righteous? Since I'm a service doer no matter what I do, then from now on, I'll change the way I believe in God. I'll just render service, and we'll see who fears who. Since I won't be praised or approved of for anything I do, then so be it. I'll change my way of living and my way of doing things. I'll do whatever you ask me to do, and I won't speak up if I have any ideas. Whoever wants to speak can do it. If someone prunes me, I'll appear to agree with them on the surface, and if anyone makes a mistake in their work, I won't say anything even if I notice it. If someone acts without an understanding of the principles, I won't tell them the principles even if I understand them. I'll just watch them act like a fool. Let them make mistakes so that they get pruned like I did, and see whether they can handle a taste of what it feels like to be classified as a service doer. Since you gave me a hard time, then I'll make things difficult for you, and won't let you have an easy ride either. Just being pruned and disciplined causes them to feel such strong emotions and feelings of resistance. Is this an attitude of accepting the truth?
No.
What's wrong with rendering service? Is it bad to render service for God? Does rendering service for God harm your dignity? Is God not worthy of having you render service for Him? Then what are you worthy of having God do for you? Why are you so sensitive to and resistant toward these words? The Creator humbled Himself to become a person who lives among humans and serves every corrupt human being. Human beings who oppose and reject Him. Why then can't people render a little service for the sake of God's management plan? What's wrong with doing this? Is there something disreputable about it? Is there something unspeakable about it? Compared to the humility and hiddenness of God, human beings will forever be despicable and ugly. Isn't that so? Corrupt people who pursue the truth may now feel only momentarily upset when they hear the title service doer. But this can become a motivating factor that can inspire them to pursue the truth, to reach submission to God. They are not so sensitive to this title that God gives to people. But this is not the case with antichrists. They're always very nitpicky about the titles that God gives people and take them to heart. It doesn't take much for a phrase that God says to infringe upon their interests and hurt them. And when something God says goes against their intention and desire to receive blessings, it hurts their self-esteem. The moment their self-esteem and dignity are hurt, they then judge, reject, and betray God. They want to leave God. They're unwilling to keep doing their duty, while at the same time they curse God for being unrighteous and for not sympathizing with people. Some people even say that God is too hard to please and that nothing they do is right. These words, sentiments, and dispositions all come from antichrists. Besides being entirely without an attitude of submission to God, they also split hairs when it comes to the various things God says, and they're neglectful of and indifferent toward the various requirements of God. They are constantly resisting this title of service doer and have no intention of accepting it or submitting, much less any intention of understanding God's intention. All they do is persistently seek to cast off this designation and identity, this status and position of service doer, and not in the least do they seek how to cooperate with God in order to satisfy God's intention, or how to achieve dispositional change, enter the truth reality, and submit to God. They don't pursue these positive things at all, and even when they're exposed as service doers, the indignation and impetuousness that they feel come bursting out all at once. How serious can this be? Some antichrists secretly curse God in public places, while cursing him loudly behind closed doors, saying, "God isn't righteous. I might as well not believe in this kind of God." They openly call out and go against God. Just this word, service doer, causes the essence of antichrists that opposes God and is averse to the truth to be revealed. Their wicked faces are thoroughly unmasked before the word service doer, and they are utterly laid bare. What exactly is laid bare? It is that they don't believe in God in order to accept His salvation or to accept the truth. Nor do they believe in God because God is the truth or because God is the sovereign over all things. Rather, they believe in God because they want something from Him. They subject themselves to coming to God's house for the sake of their own ambitions and desires. They attempt in vain to stand out from the crowd and receive blessings through their own means, efforts, hard work, and struggles. Or, even better, perhaps receive an even greater reward in their next life. Therefore, in their eyes, the word service doer is forever something degrading and a derogatory term, something they can never accept. Some brothers and sisters think, rendering service for God is our blessing. It's a good thing, an honorable thing. Antichrists, however, never accept this fact and say, rendering service for God is our blessing? What kind of thing is that to say? What a bunch of nonsense. Where is the blessing in doing that? Where is the pleasure? What can be gained by rendering service for God? Can you gain money, gold, or treasure from rendering service? Or can you get a house and a car? Everyone who renders service will be eliminated. Are there any service doers who are good people? No one who renders service will ever gain anything. They don't accept the fact fellowshipped by brothers and sisters that rendering service for God is a blessing upon mankind, and they feel resistance and repulsion toward it. They'd rather listen to anything else. Antichrists can exert themselves for, serve, and pour drinks for any official or anyone with position and prestige in the world, and will even accept rendering service for these people and be more than willing to do it. Only when they come to render service for God do they become unwilling and reluctant, full of complaints, resistance, and feelings. What kind of creatures are these people? Are these the manifestations that a follower of God should have? These are clearly manifestations of the Antichrist's essence. If an Antichrist were to go into the world to serve a mayor, provincial governor, or any prestigious politician, they'd think this was something that brought glory to their ancestors and made their family proud. They would be indescribably happy. They'd be floating on cloud 9. If anyone asked them what their job was, they'd say, "I serve the mayor. I'm the mayor's close attendant, his personal guard." Or they'd say, "I take care of the president's daily needs." They'd say this so proudly. They'd think this was a fine job, and that their whole family would share in the glory of it. They'd dream at night and wake up happy, and they wouldn't hide what they did no matter where they went. Why is that? They wouldn't see their job as shameful. They'd feel that it was honorable, a job that placed them above others, a job that put a halo over their head. However, after someone like this comes to believe in God, if they're asked to render service for Him, they aren't willing to do it. They feel resistance and even complain about and curse God. And they can also betray and deny God. Comparing these two things, we can see that antichrists are antichrists, that they are part of Satan's gang. No matter how they attend to Satan, and no matter how dirty, exhausting, or degrading that work is, they consider it an honor. When doing things for God in His house, however, no matter how meaningful, valuable, or noble the things they do are, or how exalted they are by doing them, they always consider these things to be not worth mentioning. Regardless of what a great blessing it is, and how honorable it is to render service for God and God's work, and what a precious opportunity it is for mankind, they just can't be happy about it. Why is this? There is only one reason. Antichrists are part of Satan's gang. They are satanic and are living Satans, inherently antagonistic to God. If they are asked to serve God and render service for God, they just can't get happy about it. No matter how God's house fellowships on the truth with people, or tries to get people to understand God's intention in regard to the title service doer, antichrists cannot accept it from God or accept any of the truths related to it, much less accept the fact or the truth that a created being rendering service for the Creator is an honorable, valuable, and meaningful thing. This is the attitude Antichrists harbor toward the title service doer. Faced with this title, and faced with the fact of people rendering service for God, all Antichrists have ever done is endeavor to rid themselves of this title and evade this fact. Instead of accepting the fact, accepting this title of service doer from God, and then pursuing the truth, listening to God's words, and submitting to and fearing God. Judging from the manifestations that antichrists exhibit toward the title service doer, it must be said that antichrists are of a kind with Satan, that they are part of Satan's hostile forces, and that they are antagonistic to God, the truth, and all positive things. The attitude Antichrists harbor toward the title service doer is one of unacceptance, resistance, repulsion, and detestation. No matter who this title comes from, they constantly feel resistance toward it and do not accept it, believing that being a service doer is lowly, and that it is always lowly no matter for whom they are rendering service. They think that service doer is not a definition that God gives to man based on man's essence, but is rather a challenge and a show of contempt toward man's identity and worth. This is the main view that Antichrists have of the title service doer. From Antichrist's attitude toward God's words, we can see that they don't regard God's words as criteria or as the truth, but instead as things for them to scrutinize and analyze. That is to say, they don't accept God's words on the premise of comprehending the truth or accepting that God is the creator, but rather approach God's words on the premise of scrutinizing, feeling resistance, and standing in opposition. To them, every word God says and every saying He utters is an object for scrutiny, and the title of service doer is no exception. They put effort into scrutinizing and pondering the word service doer. And in God's words, they see that God doesn't regard service doers as good, but rather as lowly, as inferior, as worthless, as people that God doesn't love, and as people that God detests. Even though this is God's attitude toward the title service doer, there is a context to and a reason for Him having such an attitude. It is based on the essence of man. There is also another fact which they haven't seen. No matter how much God detests and hates corrupt mankind, God has never given up on saving mankind, nor has He stopped the work of His management plan to save mankind. Antichrists don't believe this fact, nor do they acknowledge it or see it. They just fixate on what God has to say about the outcomes of various kinds of people, and particularly in regard to the title service doer, they have an exceedingly sensitive attitude. They don't want to be service doers, and they don't want to be defined as service doers by God, much less render service for God wearing the title of service doer. That's why, when Antichrists come to God's house, they make inquiries in many different circles, asking whether they themselves are service doers. And from God's words and what people say about them, they want to hear words of honesty and get to the truth of the matter. Are they service doers or not? If they are, then they instantly and immediately walk away. They don't render service for God or for God's house. They have such a strong reaction against the title of service doer, and it becomes evident that identity, position, prospects, destiny, and destination are, as far as Antichrists are concerned, items to be permanently pursued and interests that are never abandoned. To Antichrists, service doers rank lowest among mankind as defined by God. No matter what you say or how many people accept this fact and this title, Antichrists will absolutely not accept it. When doing work, they only demand that others render service for them, listen to them, obey them, and revolve around them. And they never require themselves to cooperate or discuss things with others, or to ask for others' opinions, consult God's intentions, or seek the truth principles. They think, if I were to cooperate and discuss things with others and seek the truth principles when I do things, then I'd be demeaning myself and losing my autonomy. And wouldn't that be rendering service? Wouldn't I be toiling away behind the scenes while others take the spotlight? Wouldn't I be attending to and serving others? This is something they absolutely do not want to do. They just demand that others attend to them, surrender to them, listen to them, appreciate them, give them high praise, make them look good in all things, leave them a place, serve them, and work for them, and even demand that God give them appropriate rewards and a suitable crown in accordance with what they've done. Even when anyone mentions how great a price God has paid, and how much He has suffered for the salvation of mankind, how He has humbled Himself, and how much He has provided for mankind, when antichrists hear these words and see these facts, they remain indifferent and take them for granted. How do antichrists interpret such things? They say, God is supposed to do everything for man and is supposed to bestow the best on man, bestow blessings and grace, and bestow peace and joy on man. He's supposed to dedicate all of this to man. It's his obligation. And when people forsake things, expend themselves, and pay a price for God, when they offer up everything for God, they're supposed to get rewards from God and receive something even better. Isn't that a fair transaction? An equal trade? What is there to talk about with this? What merit does God have? Why haven't I seen any of God's merit? God bestows things upon man, so isn't it natural that man deserves to receive them? People have been paying a price. They don't believe that all these things God does for man are the greatest grace to man. They're not grateful, and they don't think to repay God. Instead, they want to exchange the price they pay for the beautiful destination God has promised mankind. And they naturally believe that it's proper for them to desire blessings and harbor all these intentions. And so, however one looks at it, God shouldn't make people His service doers. They believe that people have dignity and integrity. And if people who have such great love and who can give to charity, expend themselves, and forsake things are made to render service for God, then they're being seriously humiliated and treated too unjustly. To antichrists, all these things that God does are not worth mentioning. Rather, they infinitely magnify the things that they do themselves, even if it's something quite small, and treat these things as capital for them to receive blessings. Some people never do anything well when doing their duty in the church. If the brothers and sisters don't accept the things they do, the skills and talents they provide, or the ideas and suggestions they offer, then they'll refuse to keep working and want to call it quits and walk away. They'll want to abandon God. If you ask them to cooperate with someone, they won't do it. And if you ask them to do all they can in doing their duty, they won't do that either. They'll just issue orders left and right, get others to listen to them, and get people to attend to them, become their service doers and serve them instead of doing their own duties in God's house. And if they don't get this kind of treatment, or if they lose this kind of treatment, this treatment of having others wait upon them, work for them, and follow their orders, then they want to call it quits and walk away. They believe that God isn't righteous. Their hearts are full of complaints and anger against God, and develop hatred toward the brothers and sisters, and no one is able to help them. They can't work harmoniously with anyone and can't associate with anyone on equal footing. Their rules for associating with others are that it can only be them who stands above others when speaking and acting, watching others doing everything for them and following every order and slogan they utter. No one is worthy of cooperating with them, and no one is qualified to associate with them on equal footing. If someone treats them as a buddy or as an ordinary brother or sister, and speaks to them, discusses work with them, and fellowships on understanding with them as though they are equals, then they take this as a terrible insult and a tremendous challenge to their integrity. In their hearts, they hate and feel hostility towards such people, and they'll look for opportunities to retaliate against anyone who treats them as an equal or who doesn't take them seriously. Isn't this what antichrists do? This is the hierarchical perspective that antichrists reveal when it comes to associating with other people. Of course, this relates to the genuine opinion and attitude that antichrists harbor toward the title of service doer. They can't even accept a title that God gives to mankind. So can they accept the condemnation, exposing, and evaluation of others? They're even less able to accept these things. In one respect, they feel hostility and resistance toward the title and the essence of service doer. But in another, they tirelessly draw more people in and bring them on board to render service for them, serve them, attend to them, and obey them. Isn't this despicable? The essence of such people is wicked, and that is absolutely true. They desire to control others. They themselves are clearly worthless and can't do anything. They're just trash in God's house. They have no normal humanity, and they can't associate normally with others, let alone have any normal reason. They don't understand the truth at all. They are not enlightened about the truth. They only have a little professional knowledge and grasp a few skills, and they can't do any duty well. Yet still, they don't behave well and want to seize power. And when they can't seize power, they feel that they're done for, thinking, I must have been rendering service when I did those things before. I'm not willing to render service. I'd better hurry and leave now before I expend too much effort or lose too much. This is the idea they have. They always make such a determination and come to such a decision. They can stop believing and leave at any time, dropping their duty at any moment and making their getaway, returning to Satan's embrace and being its partner in evil doing. Are there such people as this? When it comes to some aspect of professional work, they may understand a little, but in terms of the truth principles that they must grasp for that aspect of professional work, they're totally ignorant. When it comes to an aspect of knowledge or gifts, They may possess some of these, but as far as the truth principles, they must understand to do their duty. They're again utterly ignorant, and their comprehension is distorted. They can't cooperate harmoniously with others, and they don't speak the same language as others when fellowshipping together. What are such people suited for? If they truly have a conscience and reason, then they will be able to treat other people correctly. And when people say things that are right and that accord with the truth, they'll be able to accept them, they'll willingly submit, and they'll be able to rebel against their flesh. They shouldn't always want to stand out above the crowd, lead others, and control others. Instead, they should let go of their ambition and desire to excel above others, and be willing to be the most insignificant of people. Even if it involves rendering service, they should do whatever they can. They themselves are ordinary people, so they should return to the position of ordinary people, do their best to do their duties, and be down-to-earth people. People like this will be able to stand firm in the end. If they don't choose this path and instead think themselves to be great and noble, if no one can touch them or get to them, and if they want to be a local bully, a tyrant, and follow the path of antichrists, then they're destined to be evil people. If they aren't willing to be the most insignificant person, to be totally unknown or away from the limelight, or to give it their all, then they are surely antichrists and cannot be saved. This is dangerous for them. If someone like this can reflect on themselves, have self-knowledge, accept God's sovereignty and arrangements, take their appropriate position, be an ordinary person, and no longer make any pretenses, then they'll have a chance to attain salvation. If you always want to be overbearing and unreasonable and display yourself as a powerful figure, then that's futile. God's house is full of God's chosen people, and no matter how formidable, fierce, or evil you are, it's no use. God's house isn't a fighting arena, so if you want to fight, then go do it in the arena of the world. No one in God's house wants to fight with you. No one is interested in it or has the spare time for it. God's house is a place that preaches the truth, that helps people understand the truth and put the truth into practice. If you can't practice the truth, then that's difficult to handle, and it only shows that you don't belong here. If you always want to fight, you always want to be fierce, you always want to be ruthless, and you always want to be overbearing and unreasonable, then the church is not the right place for you. Most people in God's house love the truth. They want to follow God and gain life, and they don't enjoy engaging in intrigue and fighting with devils. Only antichrists enjoy fighting right and left, and competing for power and profit, and that's why antichrists cannot stand firm in God's house. There is a kind of person who is incredibly sensitive to such things as identity, position, and status, and who feels enormous resistance and repulsion toward the title service doer in particular, and absolutely cannot accept it. Such people are antichrists. Not only do they not pursue the truth and are averse to the truth, but they're also averse to being addressed as a service doer. Those who are averse to the title service doer should actually pursue the truth. If they were capable of pursuing the truth, wouldn't they then have cast off the title of service doer? But this is exactly the problem. Because they're extremely averse to the truth, they will never walk the path of pursuing and practicing it. That's why, in the work of God's management plan, they will forever play the role of service doers. Of course, for antichrists, to be able to act as service doers in God's management plan is still a blessing. It's a chance for them to see the deeds of the Creator, to hear the Creator express the truth and share His innermost thoughts with mankind, and to appreciate the wisdom and almighty deeds of the Creator. To them, it's not a bad thing to be service doers for the Creator. And whether they can comprehend or not, being God's service doers and rendering service in God's house should be something that these antichrists and companions of Satan will always remember, even if God's work ends later on. Throughout the entire process of corrupt mankind's antagonizing of God, antichrists unknowingly render service for God's management plan. And this is the tiny bit of value in each antichrist's existence. This is a fact. Antichrists make their contribution by allowing God's chosen people to discern and recognize antichrists from the negative side. Whether they're willing to acknowledge this fact or not, and regardless of whether they're willing, glad, and happy to be service doers, in any case, rendering service for God's work as service doers and taking on this role are things that are worthwhile. This is God exalting them. Some people say, does God exalt antichrists as well? What's wrong with that? They're created beings. Can't God exalt them? What I say is true. Now, how do antichrists feel when they hear these words? They shouldn't try to find faults and should gain some comfort. At the very least, they've contributed a measure of effort to the great matter of God's management plan. Regardless of whether they did this willingly, or whether they did it actively or passively. In any case, this was God exalting them, and they should accept this joyfully and not resist it. If antichrists can rebel against their ancestors, rebel against Satan, and pursue the truth and pursue submission to the Creator, then tell me, will God be happy?
Yes, He will.
This is also an honor for God's chosen people, and they should be happy too. This is a good thing. Whether or not this fact is tenable, in any case, if antichrists can change course and walk the path of repentance, then of course that's a good thing. So, why do I say that this is an honor for God's chosen people? If an antichrist rendered service willingly, wouldn't there be one less scourge in God's house? If you had one less devil among you, one less disturber and troublemaker, wouldn't your days be much more tranquil? Looking at it from this perspective, if antichrists were truly willing to render service, then this would also be a good thing that is worth celebrating. You have to encourage and help them, and not completely dismiss them. If you have good intentions and let them stay, but their rendering service is more trouble than it's worth and leads to disaster, then they should be handled according to the principles. Isn't this a good way to do things? There is another kind of person who is worth mentioning. There are some people who are able to suffer and pay a price in the course of doing their duty. And sometimes they can also obey and submit or handle matters according to the principles. Their subjective desire is to walk the path of pursuing the truth. They can always submit to anything arranged by the above or the church. And they can always complete tasks on time. They don't cause disruptions and disturbances in God's house. And the work they do and the duty they take on bring many benefits and advantages to brothers and sisters. From the outside, although they haven't done any evil, they don't disrupt or disturb, and they don't seem like evil people. They do something that ordinary people can't and don't do, and that is that they enjoy cultivating their influence and establishing their own independent kingdoms. When they're assigned to some task, the moment they become the person responsible for that job, they can start establishing their own independent kingdoms and can start unconsciously cultivating their power and connections within the scope of their influence. Within this scope, everyone is completely and totally won over by them, and people give loud praise to and greatly admire everything they do, everything they say, and the price they pay. They regard the scope of their management as their own little family within God's family. From the outside, they appear to be able to pay a price, suffer, and bear responsibility. There appears to be no problem. However, at crucial moments, they're capable of betraying the interests of God's house. In order to safeguard their own prestige and their place atop the mountain, and to safeguard their absolute position, dignity, and power in the church, they don't offend or hurt anyone. Even if someone harms or betrays the interests of God's house, and even if someone disturbs or destroys the work of God's house, they don't look into the matter, they pay it no heed, and they can tolerate it. So long as that person doesn't threaten their position and still works in service of them within their scope of influence, then that's fine. This is their highest criterion. No matter what disturbances that person causes, they don't see it, they take no notice, and they don't prune or reprimand that person, much less handle them. Such people are dangerous elements. They're difficult for the average person to discern, and perhaps you won't be able to notice anything amiss with them when they have no position. As soon as they have position, however, their nature essence is totally unmasked. And what exactly is unmasked? It is that there is a purpose to the price they pay and everything they do. They don't do these things for the sake of safeguarding the interests of God's house. They're not truly doing their duty, and they're not doing all these things for God to see, but rather for people to see. They want to attract the gaze, the eyes, and the attention of others. And even more than this, they want to mislead people's hearts so that people look up to, admire, and praise them. That's why they don't care about how God sees or treats them. If God says they're only there to render service, they are indifferent. So long as people can kneel at their feet and bow down to them, then it's fine. These people are dangerous elements and are not of the same mind as God and God's house. and their hearts are not the same as those of God's chosen people who genuinely pursue the truth. They are cultivating influence for themselves and are also cultivating influence for Satan. Judging from their various manifestations, the duty they do and everything they do is all a way to show themselves off and fawn on others as much as they possibly can. Antichrists can render some service in God's house and in the work of God's management plan, and at one stage they may even be good service doers. However, because of the path they walk, and because of the objectives and direction they choose, as well as their desire for position and power, and yearning for fame and gain that they have inside them, they can never shake off the title of service doer. They can't understand the truth. They can't comprehend what the truth reality is, or enter into it. They aren't able to practice the truth. They can't attain true submission, and they can't attain fear of God. Such people are dangerous elements. They have profound philosophies for worldly dealings, have very clever ways of interacting with people, pay particular attention to the way they speak and their wording when speaking to others, and also pay close attention to the methods they use when associating with people. Although they may not appear to be treacherous and evil on the surface, their hearts are filled with wicked ideas, thoughts, and views, and even notions and misunderstandings about truth and failure to understand God. Even though people can't see what about these people is evil, or see that they are evil people, because their essence is so wicked, and because they can't ever do their duty in line with the truth principles or walk the path of pursuing the truth and reach true submission to God, in the end, they are forever unable to cast off this title of service doer. These people are even more underhanded and more capable of misleading others than obvious antichrists and evil people. From the outside, they appear to have no opinion about and harbor no attitude toward the title of service doer. Much less do they feel any resistance toward it. However, the fact is that judging by their essence, even if they render service for God, they still harbor intentions and goals. They don't render service unconditionally, and they don't do it to gain the truth. Because these people are wicked and crafty inside, it's not easy for them to be discerned by others. Only in crucial matters and at crucial times are their nature essence, thoughts, views, and the path they walk revealed. As this continues, if these people choose this way of pursuit and choose to walk such a path, then one can imagine that such people will not be able to attain salvation. They use the trust that God's house places in them and the opportunity of God's work to scheme for their own benefits, to control and torment people, and to satisfy their own ambitions and desires. In the end, they don't gain the truth, but are instead revealed due to having done all sorts of evil. When they're revealed, it becomes clear that these people don't pursue the truth, and that they don't believe in God for the sake of pursuing the truth and attaining salvation. After listening to God's words and His exposure of all kinds of people, if these people consistently use the principles, means, and methods of dealing with the world to do their duty, then there can only be one final outcome. They must take on the role of service doer in God's management work, and finally be revealed and cast out. This is a fact. Have you ever had experiences with such people yourselves before? When they're revealed and expelled, some antichrists become commanders without an army. The evil they've done has been too much and too great, and brothers and sisters are repulsed by them and abandon them. There is also another kind of person who, when they're revealed and when they're condemned and rejected by the church, have many accomplices and helpers who speak up for them, take up the fight for them, and make a ruckus before God. Aren't these kinds of people even more capable of misleading others? Such people are even more dangerous. As far as how antichrists regard the title service doer, and which underlying practices, ideas, and manifestations they exhibit, we'll just end our fellowship here for the time being.